Welcome to the Realm Kast. I am the Mortal Kombat fan Tim from the Mortal Kombat group on Facebook. And with me as always is my co-host Yani, the lore master from the Mortal Kombat meme realm. Welcome, Yani.
Hey, thanks.
And you may know today's guest from his successful YouTube videos, including his Wasted Potential series, or Potential series. Welcome to the show, Fourth Snake.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you on the call today.
Pretty excited, yep.
Now, before we get started, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Like, how has Mortal Kombat affected you, and what are some of your favorite characters and games from the Mortal Kombat series?
Well, I could just give a brief. I say brief. When I say brief, it's usually about 20 minutes long. A brief history, I suppose, of me in Mortal Kombat. The first one I played was 4 on the PC, because my dad just randomly got it for me when I was about 7 or so. And I picked Johnny Cage first because he was a cool guy with sunglasses. I wasn't quite in that teenager, ninjas are so cool phase yet. So if that was the case, I probably would have gone with Sub-Zero. But I picked Johnny Cage and I didn't think too much of it. Then on the Dreamcast, we got this bundle of 10 games, which included MK Gold, which that was a little better for me at the time. Then I saw Deadly Alliance sometime later for about 20 quid. So I got that, and that was what really got me into the series. I don't know if what specifically about it got me into it. I think there was so much more depth to the gameplay compared to 4, with the way the various fighting styles and stuff like that.
Fighting style, the 3D and everything as well, yeah.
Yeah. Plus all the in-depth tutorials and that. It's just great. And then Deception came out a couple of years later, and that one is still my favorite to this day. It just did so much for improving the gameplay from Deadly Alliance, but also for the setting. I mean, it's one of those things that I think is a real shame about the series now, is that in the NetherRealm era, there's basically 3 realms: Earthrealm, Outworld, and NetherRealm. But you go back to Deception, and we had 6. And others like Zatera that we didn't get to visit, but there were 6 we got to see, and there were plenty more that we could have explored, but we don't really get that anymore, which is a real shame.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to get into this, so yeah, I totally agree with you.
Okay, so today we're going to be discussing basically the current plot of the Mortal Kombat games, as well as some of the retcons and inconsistencies which came from the current, I guess we call it the
reboot era.
Age. Yeah, the reboot era.
Yeah.
And then we'll also kind of dive into some of the leaks that have been coming out this past couple weeks too. So first of all, Snake, have you seen Mortal Kombat Scorpion Revenge? I know it just got released today, but
I've not. No, a lot of people ask my opinions on it because that's just going to happen. I have such strong opinions on the whole franchise. So anything new that comes out, people are going to go, "What's your opinion on this movie or on this casting news or these leaks?" But I've not seen it. I do plan to watch it, obviously, and I hope, because I've heard some good things about it, so I hope it is going to be the MK story we deserve. So I do have my reservations.
If you're still a big Johnny Cage fan, I don't know if you'll completely love the way they treated him, but
oh no,
I'm not spoiling anything. Not spoiling it. What are some of your expectations from this upcoming movie? I mean, from the Scorpion's Revenge movie.
A lot of focus on Scorpion. Probably too much compared to what he is in the actual story. I mean, it's not hard to figure out. Oh, there's gonna be a lot of focus on Scorpion. His name's in the title, obviously, right? But it's kind of like actually what they were planning to do with MK Rebirth. Did you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah,
because that was going to be some underground tournament with no connection to Outworld. So what was the point? But it was going to have Scorpion as the main character. So it's almost like a revival of that.
That went on to be Mortal Kombat Legacy anyway, right? It was just a sort of reimagining of everything. Or are you talking about something different?
To an extent, that did lead into Legacy, but Legacy didn't do the same story. It was just stylistically the same.
Yeah, with same director.
Cast members. Yeah, but I didn't even watch the second season of that. But I know that did a tournament.
I recommend it, by the way. I mean, it's not everything you'd want from a Mortal Kombat series, but it was still pretty cool to have, you know?
They brought Kerry Tagawa into it, so that's always a plus anytime.
And Dan Southworth as Kenshi. Virgil himself as Kenshi. That's pretty inspired casting.
Yeah.
But then I've also heard that Liu Kang's gone on a bit of a Jin Kazuma edge fest with his hoodie and his...
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of take on Liu Kang and Kung Lao. It's sort of swapped their roles in a way. But definitely check it out, man. I think you'd have a good time with it, and it's Mortal Kombat content, you know.
I mean, I've been considering re-reviewing the first season as well because, well, the original version that was like 2012.
Yeah, a while back.
Yeah, I mean, almost a decade at this point. Jesus Christ.
Well, I'm not going to spoil too much about Scorpion's Revenge. I do think it was enjoyable myself. So
I agree.
I think you're really going to like it.
Unlike the live action one, that sounds like a travesty.
Talked about that a bit last week too.
It's all over the place right now, you know. Like it looks like it's gonna work out in some ways, and then in others, we're just wondering where the direction is, or if there is any whatsoever.
Yeah, but with how things have been going, it's not into production yet, has it?
It's
I don't think.
done. They're editing it now.
Yeah, they're editing.
Yeah, they've even moved up the release. Well, now because of COVID-19, I don't know, but they did have the.
It's March next year, isn't it?
I'm not sure what it is currently because they've been switching that date around.
But I mean, all we can do is hope for the best, really.
Yeah, I mean, what I was hoping for was that they hadn't entered production yet at all, so then they would have time to reconsider some of these questionable decisions, like Jax is apparently an assassin. Or
What?
something.
I didn't hear about
Yeah,
this.
I've been misquoting it a bit, but the actor playing Jax in the movie, he said something along those lines that Jax he'd been fighting monsters for so long, like bad people, so he's kind of become that, and I think he's described as an assassin.
I'm losing
Which reminds me
confidence.
of, back when the Dead or Alive movie was made, and Christie, the contract assassin, was a thief instead.
Interesting.
Why would you do that?
Why?
I'm hoping the comment that Jack's actor made is more of a fighting, metaphorical monsters and not literal
Yes.
creatures. We'll see.
But the thing is that question, why, is asked about so many decisions lately, even just not with just the movie, but with Mortal Kombat as a whole. We can totally get into it right now with Mortal Kombat 11. Why?
Let's go into the plot a little bit.
I suppose the first question is for anybody who's not been watching your videos. Could you tell us very briefly what you thought as a whole of Mortal Kombat 11's plot?
Kind of a train wreck. It's one of those things because there's so much wrong with it. A lot of it is more personal and opinion based, but then there's just things that I feel are more objective. Like, I do not understand what Chronica's plan is exactly. She wants to revive Shinnok, but if she rewinds time, her powers don't work on the gods. So how would Shinnok be revived from being just a head if her powers won't work on him?
I asked the same question myself, and what I sort of gathered from my understanding was that Chronica had sort of manipulated events in such a way where it would all progress to the same point it would in Mortal Kombat 11, right? So, yes, what you're saying is true. Well, how would she have power over the gods if they're alive and everything? But the thing is, the way she's done everything already would mean that it would get to that specific point. The only point she'd been having issues with was actually Liu Kang versus Raiden, and then that point onwards.
Which is another problem she causes for herself, because she wants to pit them against each other so that they won't work against her together. And she's done quite a good job of that with the whole Revenant thing and Dark Raiden. So they're already going to war with each other. They're ready to kill each other. But then she does the whole time merger thing, bringing good versions of them who are working together into the present.
Yeah.
So it's one of those cases where if the villain had not, it's a weird comparison to make, but are you familiar with the plot of Highlander 2, The Quickening?
Yeah.
In essence, basically, with the Immortals in that, when there are two of them on the same planet or something along those lines, they have their immortality, but when there's only one of them, they don't. And so after Connor, good old Christopher Lambert from the MK movie, Raiden, after he won in the first film, he's the only one left on Earth, but he's actually an alien, you see, because that was a weird twist they felt needed to happen. And so the villain, Michael Ironside, comes from their home planet to Earth to kill Connor, but Connor was growing old and dying because he's not immortal anymore. So when that guy comes to Earth and pisses him off, he's now made sure this guy is immortal and given him a reason to fight him. If he just stayed on his home planet, Connor would have died in a few years. And Chronica's done the same thing. If she just let the two fight, she would have won.
Yeah, it's an apt comparison, actually.
And I think you also kind of just described why so many people hate the second Highlander movie.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, why does she pit Raiden and Liu Kang against each other when, I mean, they're already doing so, and actually what she's doing is bringing them together. That's completely unnecessary. It's a very good point.
I think I can see now why Ed was talking about Chronicles. She's our first female final boss, because that's the only thing that you can possibly say about her, because the plan makes no sense. She's boring. She's not got an interesting fighting style. And she's also part of this horrendous retcon that there have been dozens of other timelines that we just never saw.
Yeah, the whole timeline thing was a big issue for me, because it was unnecessary, and it's sort of like NetherRealm trying to bring in stuff that happens for DC into the Mortal Kombat universe.
Yeah, and they're also trying to make Chronicles seem like she is this huge mastermind, like this is how much of a threat she is. She's been interfering in things we didn't even know happened in the first place. But the problem is, because her plan never works out, she always has to reset the timeline. It makes her look so incompetent, because her plan, no matter how many times she tries, she never succeeds. But then we see what she did with the time merger. It's easy to see why she never succeeds. She's an idiot.
Well, I think the way that they tried to have that look was that they were making it in such a way where Chronica has been building up this whole plan all for eons, basically, right? Like, that's probably the direction they were trying to do. Now, I do agree with you. Yeah. They didn't go about that properly. And by the way, for the record, for anybody listening, I'm trying to sort of look at things from NetherRealm's perspective as well. Okay? So
He's the devil's advocate.
But it is very difficult when it comes to Chronica's advocate, yes. But I do disagree with something you said about Chronica's lack of being interesting, I guess, lack of any interesting attributes. I think I've always found sort of time manipulation to be a very cool thing, and I thought that was probably the coolest thing that she had going for her. Problem was the execution. That's where I agree with you.
You also have Garrus, which has his own time manipulation.
Which I thought was a sort of ripoff. He's a ripoff of Chronica and Tremor. Sorry, Forthnake, you were saying?
I think if you cut Chronica and had Garrus as the main villain, the game would be a lot more interesting, because he makes better use of the powers.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, although there's still the issue that these characters can freeze people in time and never take advantage of that.
Yes.
I'm gonna taunt Raiden and then kidnap Liu Kang, which she could have done when Garrus froze him and Kung Lao when they were stealing the waters back in like chapter 3.
Yeah, I was wondering the exact same thing. And why didn't he just kill Kung Lao at the same time?
That's one of the things. So you could say, well, it's because if they do that the future versions will also die, but the future versions are undead, so it might not work that way with them.
True, yeah. See, my biggest issue is that they have apparently all these separate timelines. Now, if they kill one person, their past self, it would kill the future self, with that logic. But the problem is, NetherRealm have indicated that there are multiple timelines. So if that is the case, killing the past self shouldn't make a difference, because they shouldn't actually relate to one another, as they're from different timelines.
Well, they're from different points in the same timeline, because there's different definitions of timeline. Some people say timeline is just a point in time, whereas others will say the order of events. I think that's partly why there's so much misinterpretation and misunderstanding of what's actually going on in the game, and it's so unclear because of that particular word.
Because they opened themselves up to this by choosing to go with this whole time aspect. And by the way, I love the fact that you just played devil's advocate with me for NetherRealm. I never thought I'd see the day. But yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. Yes, Phantom, sorry?
My biggest question with this, in relation to the Elder Gods, how does Cetrion kind of fit into all of this?
Don't get me started.
My impression from Mortal Kombat 11 was that she was an Elder God, and then she stepped down to compete. Was I understanding that correctly through this game's story?
Well, no, I think she's just still...
She's still an Elder Goddess.
God. I mean, that's kind of why every time she has a fight, the other character has to have some kind of power-up added to justify it, because with Shinnok, he's a fallen Elder God. He's been stripped of a lot of his power, but Cetrion is theoretically still at full power of an Elder God, which we've never actually seen before. And that's one of the things that makes her so disappointing, because that would be interesting to see, and that's why Jackie or Jax needs the crown to power them up, and then you got Liu Kang and Raiden combining their powers. So there's always an explanation for why she loses in that way, but they don't do much with her. And then right at the end, they decide, let's give her a bit of a character arc. Like, oh, I'm starting to doubt my mother, but I'm going to go along with it anyway and die and just support this entire character arc. Also, she changed appearance at the end, and it's not really explained. explained.
I mean, you can't fight crime if you ain't looking cute, right? Well, okay. Well, this actually opens up a question that I did want to ask you. Your opinion on, well, the new characters themselves, the playable characters. So Garrus, Cetrion, and the Collector.
In terms of moveset or story?
I suppose both. No, okay. Let's go with story.
Collector is a really odd one. This is going to be the focus of an upcoming Wasted Potential, which will basically be about putting a different character in his place, because Collector is such an oddity, because this story is the end of this timeline. So any new character should be immediately relevant to this plot. So Chronica, Garrus, and Cetrion, they're all connected. They're part of the main villain force. But Collector's just part of Shao Kahn's entourage. And doesn't really contribute anything to the story. You could easily just give his role to anybody else, like Scarlet. Her present version doesn't exist. She's probably dead, but you could just have her still be around and she could explain it. And then there's really nothing else that Collector contributes. I feel like it would have made more sense, I think, if he was the master of the crypt. Well, I went into this a bit in Mortal Kombat Chronicles, the fan fiction series I write. Mm-hmm. My concept for him in the crypt is that Shang Tsung's been dead for 30 years. It's clear he's not coming back. So when this guy shows up, Collector's like, okay, you can just take whatever you want, but in return, you will listen to my master's story. And that's where we'd learn a bunch more lore about past tournaments and stuff.
That's a pretty interesting take, actually. I like it.
I feel like his concept kind of had that type of aesthetic going towards it. You know, he was going around taking items and things like that. Whenever he was first introduced, I kind of expected to see him more in that kind of role in the, in like not the main game, but things like the crypt.
The crypt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I see where you're coming from with all that. Although I do think that as a character himself, I think he's the best of the newcomers in that he seems the most Mortal Kombat of the three, or technically four with Chronica. But he seems to fit the bill the most, right? He's this brutal, like, character of a different species, like a very interesting inclusion. And I have to admit also the way that they did include him as being Shao Kahn's tax guy, basically. But it was still a good way to handle it, you know. Although I do agree that probably Scarlet would have fit better into that role, and I say that as Scarlet being one of my favorite characters. I think that Collector was definitely underutilized in the story. I mean, he pretty much showed up once technically twice, I suppose.
Yeah, the Tarkatan camp.
Yeah, but there's not really much development with him, is there? So what was the point? It seems like it was just to bring in some new character just for the sake of having a new character, which is a shame.
I feel like it would have been better saved for DLC or for the next game rather than being in part, because all the characters who are on the base roster are going to be in the story mode, and so they need to have characters who can contribute to the narrative in some way, I think, and he kind of doesn't. Yeah, I do agree. Well,
his inclusion has actually upset a lot of fans because he got included at the arena stage of Mortal Kombat 9, him and Aaron Black both, and there were quite a few characters there that fans wanted to see in Mortal Kombat 11 that haven't made the cuts.
Who would have made more sense to bring in from that time.
Yeah. Even if they've just been in the cutscenes and not playable, obviously that's not going to go over too well with a lot of fans, but I feel like they should have at least been there.
Yes.
And Melina just bopping around in the background sometimes.
Yeah, like why is Shao Kahn mentioning Melina being dead when Chronica could have, brought her back? It doesn't make sense.
All of a sudden, we're establishing that Kahn genuinely viewed Melina as his daughter, not just as a tool, but then she's not in the game to actually do anything with that.
Yeah, it's like that development finally got there, and then, oh, wait, no, we can't take it anywhere. Well, what do you think of Garrus, then?
Kind of like his design, to some extent. It doesn't really fit Mortal Kombat. I think the whole Chronica thing always feels a little out of place. Although there is kind of an issue that he's just there to work for Chronica and nothing else. He has kind of no purpose of his own, which is kind of indicative of a lot of the characters in the series and the way it's been written, where the characters are mostly just the faction with one or two personality quirks. They don't really have goals of their own anymore.
Yes.
I think Garrus and Chronica could have been the same character, and they could have used Frost or somebody as a henchman. I mean, because they introduced characters like Frost and said they were working for Chronica now. Like, why not
go with it?
Yeah. I mean, Garrus's death was an amazing part of the story, but I think he was a wasted character.
There are two things he needed to have been given to be quite memorable. One is that he needs to have won some fights, because the idea is that he gets stronger every time he's defeated, but he never never wins. He just never gets strong.
But that's the thing. He was never strong. He's still getting stronger, guys.
Another thing is they should have given him Chronicles' fatality.
Yes.
Because his fatalities don't make use of the time powers. I think if you took his fatal blow and Chronicles' fatality and made them his fatalities, it'd be way cooler than I'm going to punch you into a wall and then going to pull your flesh off from your fingertips.
Yeah. I mean, while it was cool, it didn't really fit.
Or I'm going to punch you a few times and then hit you so hard at the back of your head, your face will fly off.
It is Mortal Kombat.
I am a huge Tremor fan, so
I was just gonna say.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed because I really wanted Tremor to come back, but I was excited to play Garrus. He had that additional skill set in him with the time capabilities.
It's
But
that
honestly,
whole
I would
Drake
love
thing,
to
isn't it? The Drake meme with like looking away from Garrus and then pointing at Tremor, right?
Honestly, the two are so similar. You could very easily have made it that Garrus is Tremor, just augmented by Chronica. So we have some new
exactly.
powers.
Just take Tremor and give him Garrus's role. Garrus was not needed. This is where I go into what I think of Garrus. So basically, I agree with you. He doesn't fit as a Mortal Kombat character, but I am a lot more against his character just because of the fact that yes, okay, his idea is the sands of time. That's pretty cool. That's a very cool way to take things. But he's literally a ripoff of both Chronica and Tremor. And Tremor was a character that fans had been asking for years. Like, literally the only good thing to come out of Special Forces, apart from technically Tasya, maybe, you know? But...
Yeah, MK fans latch onto the weirdest things.
I mean, come on, a ninja with earth powers, I think that's pretty cool. I don't blame everyone. I was one of them, I have to say.
We're going to get Hydro in Mortal Kombat 12.
I was expecting him this time. I really was, because of the cyber stage, the Cyber Linque assembly.
Oh, yeah. Or him or Chrome.
Yeah, Chrome would have been cool, actually, but Ed Boon did deconfirm him pretty early on.
The problem with bringing in Hydro is that he's a ninja with water powers.
Rain.
Wanting Rain.
Rain, by the way, is my favorite
So if
character.
he had Hydro, people would say, yeah, but what about Rain?
Yeah, I probably would have been one of those
Rain's
guys.
time to come back.
Rain's time was MKX. They totally ignored him for no reason despite being in the story, and they didn't capitalize on that. That was the perfect moment for him to come in, especially considering he featured so heavily into the story. I can definitely see your point with Hydro. Although at this point, Hydro is one of those characters like... well, Tremor basically, and Scarlet even, who fans have been asking for something like him for a while, so I think he would have been pretty accepted, actually.
Also, with including Terminator in the series, it would have made a lot of sense to have thrown Chrome in there and give him a T-1000 skin.
That would have been way better.
I'm surprised they didn't do that.
Well, if the alleged leaks of Stryker possibly coming in, they could give him the T-1000 costume.
Oh, that would be cool. Well, that'd be worth seeing. If he is going to be in there, giving him a T-1000 costume, I would like to see that.
I'm praying that Stryker doesn't make it in right now as you guys discuss this.
It certainly makes more sense. It just makes more sense to have the police character with the costume of the police character from the Terminator in the game that Terminator is in than it does to have Jackie as Ellen Ripley in the game that doesn't have Alien.
Yep, I agree. Or just Jackie, full stop. What?
You're not even wrong.
Literally the worst Mortal Kombat character of all time. I back you up, Suhao. You deserved the spot over her.
It should have been Jin. Kung Jin should have come back instead of Jackie, and then we could have had him share a chapter with Kung Lao.
Or Takeda.
Whether it's going to, well, part because this is going to be another thing in a wasted potential. A lot of the stuff is going to be in wasted potential. Is I feel like Jax and Jackie had not much reason to be here, and I think MK11 should have been, because it's the end of this era, they should have been more focusing on bringing an end to existing plot lines rather than trying to create new ones for characters that don't have them. And Jin never got his fight with Lao. He never got any resolution on that plot point. So if he had shared the Shaolin Monks chapter with Lao, and then at the end you choose which of the two is going to fight the Revenant Lao, will it be Lao's past self, putting a stop to his future evil self, or will it be Jin finally getting that confrontation with him? That would have been so much more interesting than Jackie, full stop.
Yeah. Jackie, yeah. No, I completely agree. And I actually really didn't like Kung Jin's character purely because of how they handled him in MKX. But unlike Jackie, he could have been redeemed. And I was shocked that they didn't bring him back, to be honest. The fact, like Jax himself, honestly, I like Jax, I do, but he was unnecessary in MK11. His role could have gone to almost any other character, like Reptile, for example. Why would Chronica not have gone to Reptile and said, I can bring back Zatera if you follow me? You know, something along those lines. But Jax and Jackie, that whole plotline was completely unnecessary, and I feel that it's just purely because NetherRealm are trying to appeal to, well, the sort of military American fan base. I was all for Jackie getting a sort of, not reboot, but like completely being revamped. But the problem was the direction they took her in. Well, this just turned into a Jackie hating episode again. But the direction they took her in was just to try and make her commercial and tough, which doesn't make her likable. So on one hand, it's a shame we didn't get Kung Jin back, but on the other, it's good because maybe they just would have ruined Kung Jin even further.
Could have been given to Jax. Like, why can't? Because Jax hasn't really changed much since MK2. So why not give Jax the cannons on his arms and let Jackie have kickboxing as her style or something like that?
Or just cease to exist, like her ending, which is the best ending in the game. Purely for that reason.
All right. Well, we can see where Yani stands on Jackie. All right, so why don't we jump into some of the retcons and inconsistencies we've seen? I mean, there's so many.
well, one important thing I did want to mention, which does relate to the retcons, is the actual sudden existence of the Titans and how that retcons the one being.
There are a lot of changes to the Pantheon, like Raiden's... No, lesser gods don't exist anymore. Raiden is a demigod.
Which makes no sense to me.
Taven, Dagon, and Rain are demigods. So are they on the same level as Raiden now?
Exactly.
That makes no sense because Argus is a lesser god as well. He's on Raiden's level. So how can his sons also be on the same level?
It's a very weird change. I remember seeing Mortal Kombat's official page say that Raiden was a demigod, and I was like, what? Since when?
Doesn't that kind of go back and undo everything, even from the original 3 Mortal Kombats, if he's now a demigod instead of a elder god?
Yeah, because he could have just taken part in all the tournaments from the get-go. But the most worrying part about this retcon with the Titans and then demigods and etc. means that the whole, the order of the deities has changed so much that the one being now doesn't matter, which actually means that technically the entire plot of Mortal Kombat has changed completely.
Yeah.
Because why would Shao Kahn suddenly be trying... Like, the whole point is that Shao Kahn was being driven to this sort of by the one being. The same thing with Onaga, or at least that was the sort of rumor behind it. But now, with no actual intention...
And that was kind of what the threat of Armageddon ultimately was, that the realms would collapse and then the essence would all reconvene into the one being. And it's the reason why deception was such a problem, because Onaga was the first person to be in a position where he could genuinely have merged the realms, except Zatera. No one mentions the fact that Zatera's still separate.
Zatera is just one of those poor plot points that could have been so much more.
They have an entire world of vampire people and they do nothing with it.
Exactly. Like Viternus, Zatera. Why have we not gotten anything elaborated on that? Why have we not seen Chaos Realm and Order Realm return? I'm tired of the NetherRealm, tired of Outworld even Edenia, you know?
No, they get their, every once in a while they get to make a brief cameo, so...
Oh yes, because that's enough.
Cameo in an ending or a comic or a combat card background.
Serena. I'm never changing my combat card icon now that she's on it.
I can't imagine what change they'll make to her if they put her in 11.
That's the thing. On one hand, I would love Serena. Like, if Serena came back to MK11, I would probably shut up about criticizing it for a long time. And by a long time, I mean a month. But I'm kind of scared to see what they would do to her.
I feel the same with Melina, because she's my favourite character because of the way I've been looking at her in more recent years, how much potential she has. And then I look at it and think, with the weird directions they've gone with elements of Shao Kahn and Kitana, and especially Sindel. I mean, you know how I feel about Sindel.
Yes.
I worry what they would do with Melina.
Speaking of all these characters that from other realms. Did you guys know that Nitara is going to be in the live action movie?
Yes, I heard they mentioned that.
She's in the animated one. Because I've seen a screenshot of her in the animated one. But she's in the live action one too?
Yeah, they've mentioned that she's going to be in it, as well as a few other 3D era characters, apparently.
So, Fourth Snake, along the lines of retcons, I mean, your Sindel videos have become quite popular. That's actually, I think, how I first discovered you is when you started producing those. And I think it's because fans resonate so well and they're so upset with the Sindel retcons.
Yeah, it's so egregious. I had a problem with the way they changed Sindel's story in 2011, where her death was this more heroic thing, but she's a completely different character now.
It's not Sindel,
and that's the thing is a lot of people will say, who cares? It doesn't matter, but it does matter because how are you supposed to get invested in a setting, in a story, when anything you like about it can just change on a whim?
I've heard one of the defenses too for Sindel's change and her ending especially is that she is still basically under the mind control spell that she was when she was first resurrected, and that's kind of where her character is at in Mortal Kombat 11. So even though her ending is her going back and changing years of Mortal Kombat history, it's still her point of view.
I would be inclined to say it's a possibility, if not for the fact that this is the end of this timeline, so that plot point's obviously not going to go anywhere. And in her ending, it's not undone. She doesn't see the truth. I mean, imagine if in MK3 her ending was she just kills everyone. She's the powerful ruler, and it's never mentioned that she was under mind control. It'd be weird.
Yeah, and I don't remember which YouTuber it was. It was either History Behind the Warrior or Brusque Poet, but one of them mentioned that this is the Sindel that new fans are going to know as Sindel, and they're not going to understand who Sindel used to be.
I think it might have actually been Four Snake that had made that reference.
I think a few people have made that point because it's so obvious to a bunch of us, I guess. Some people just don't see it that way, but this is likely to be the way Sindel is portrayed going forward, and we don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the direction they were taking her in, because I think that Mortal Kombat 11 NetherRealm Studios is all about making the characters as, well, shallow as possible, to give them just one sort of attribute that they roll with the entire time. So Sub-Zero is just ice puns and being calm. Scorpion is just being angry and wanting vengeance. Cassie being, well, sassy, you know? So Sindel is this whole kind of Yas Queen bitch, basically. And that seems to be what they want people to remember her as.
Yeah, basically. I mean, Shao Kahn has that, where he used to be a schemer, and now he's just a big dumb brute who needs everyone else to make his plans for him. You have Sonya as like tough military woman.
It's a shame. It really is, because it's sucking the depth out of the characters that we've come to love, and as a result, ruining the series.
The it's not just that you have a character who is a bit bland. I mean, this is kind of my issue with MK as it is now, is that it was better. It has been better. It can be better, but it's not. No, again, like in Deception, we had 6 realms, and now we have 3. It's just making everything so much less interesting.
Simpler. It's making it simple. That's what it is.
So much more marketable.
Yes.
Is a keyword.
And going back to another point I made, the fact that the characters are largely just the faction with 1 or 2 personality traits. Like Kenshi in the original timeline was a lone wolf. He helped out the special forces so they could get him to Outworld. That was all he cared about, because he wanted to kill Shang Tsung. Now he's just, I'm going to help the special forces, sure. I
mean, didn't he even have rapport on with going with Sub-Zero in the previous timeline, and now suddenly it's all Scorpion?
Yeah, because Sub-Zero saved him, so it was again more of a self-serving thing. And then in his bio in Armageddon, he's like, Johnny Cage has brought everyone together to fight the forces of evil. I'm going to lead the forces of good because I'm this lone wolf guy. And now he's got no personality.
Just there to be a dad to Takeda. And it's a shame. I mean, speaking of the whole clan thing, like, look at Cabal. Cabal is literally just Black Dragon right now, and greed.
I had fun in a voice chat at one point with some people on my Discord, going through the words used to describe each of those characters and discussing how wrong some of them are. That's not Cabal.
It's not. It's just like Sindel. Sindel and Cabal are not those characters anymore.
No, I'd argue Aaron Black as well, although in his case, he's less noticeable because he's still a villain.
Yes.
Do you guys remember when Cabal's fatalities were first showing up online? And this is something that they've changed since then. But when when the first batch came out, he would have this really like menacing smile anytime he did his fatalities. And then, but if he did it on any female characters, he would look sorrowful and like regretful that he had to do that type of fatality.
When they'd first shown off the fatalities, they actually had him smiling for both. Once the game actually released, they changed it so that when he was doing the fatality to women only, he wouldn't smile, just for the men.
That's interesting.
And they haven't changed it back since, as far as I know.
Well, it's a small thing, but it gives him some personality.
It does, but the problem is not that it's his personality, because it doesn't make sense with the rest of his personality, but more so that I think they're just trying to be PC.
I mean, surely if there was one character going off how he's portrayed in 11 that he would be smiling like that with, it's a woman, Sonya.
Yeah,
she's the one who burned me, so I'm going to enjoy this. But now he has more of a problem killing her than he does with like Kano, his friend, as far as he knows.
Yeah, it makes no sense, and that's the biggest problem. I would have no issue if there was a reason for it, but there isn't one.
If you look back on like even in any of the old media, any of the old Mortal Kombat medias like Defenders of the Realm and things like that, Cabal was always very much a good guy. He was on the good guy team. Now he is 100% a villain, and they always used to have these characters that had these looks like they were villains, but they were actually good guys, and it was really cool to play as them, almost in the same way that you kind of relate to anti-heroes and you like those kind of characters. That's all gone now.
That was one of the most beautiful things about Mortal Kombat, that the characters who looked a certain way would actually be something different. It's like when 16-bit was talking about how Sindel now looks like how she's supposed to, because she looked like she was this evil character, blah, blah, blah. But now Sindel doesn't actually look like what they've said, because now she just seems like she looks nicer now, whereas she used to look evil and was good, but now it's the opposite way around. So that's extremely inconsistent. I mean, it completely contradicts what they're trying to go for, apparently.
Sometimes I think PR people just have to come up with something on the spot, and it doesn't go over well.
But that's the worst part. If they know that there's going to be such a huge change to this, well, fan favorite, honestly, Sindel is technically a fan favorite. But if there's going to be such a huge change, make sure you get the story right.
Absolutely. But Cabal too. I mean, Cabal's changes also completely mess up everything that happened in 2011, because we're still on that same timeline. But if Cabal was a bad guy, when did he die to become a Revenant?
Exactly.
Was he still with the heroes? Was he undercover? Why would they trust him? Was he with Sindel as part of that raid and just died to someone else's hand? We get no explanation, because they make these changes for the most frivolous reasons and don't think through the implications of what they're changing.
I miss the 3D era. I mean, it's even the Revenants thing. The Revenants, in my opinion, has been a plotline that has been taken way too far unnecessarily. Now, if we look back at the previous timeline, you could say the Revenants actually came up not in the same time that they did in the reboot era, which is now with Shinnok and Quan Chi, but they actually came up with Onaga. And that made a lot of sense, because it was with the Dragon Army. But why start this Revenant thing in Mortal Kombat 9, literally 2011, 9 years ago now, and take it so long into the future without actually capitalizing on it until now? And even then, when you finally do it, everything is just inconsistent. It doesn't fit.
They should have either ended it with MKX and had it that Shinnok's defeated, everyone's been restored or killed for good. Either way, the Revenants are done. Or they should have gone with what was clearly being set up by X for MK11's plot, that the Revenants are the new big threat alongside Raiden.
Which leads me to the question I wanted to ask you. What did you think of Lu and Kitana going from being these revenants with no actual agency to suddenly becoming the leaders and then completely getting ruined with Chronica's inclusion?
Well, I suppose it makes sense. I mean, if you got the Revenants and the leadership is done and they're all still corrupted and evil, it makes sense that they would take over. Because like Liu Kang is the most powerful, he's the best fighter. He makes sense being the leader, and of course he still has his feelings for Kitana, so he'd keep her around. So that's not really a problem for me. I think it makes sense.
The problem starts, in my opinion. I was very happy with them being the leader, by the way. I agree with you. The problem that for me is that Chronica coming in sort of changes everything and takes. It's like how we got Dark Raiden finally, and then only for him to get whisked away in the second chapter.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Liu Kang and Kitana going from leaders to just becoming Chronica's lackeys.
And Kitana in particular is a lackey who will stand alongside the man who annexed her realm, killed her father, led her mother to her death. She'll just stand alongside Shao Kahn, no problem. Why? She should still hate him.
Exactly. If anything, that hate should burn brighter. Or darker, technically, but you know what I mean?
Even if it was just she attacks him and then Chronica or Geras freezes her to step in and say, no, you're going to work with Shao Kahn or be destroyed, and then she begrudgingly continues on, that would fix a lot of it. But it's the fact that it's not even brought up. The actual character of Kitana is not acknowledged because the Revenant Kitana is not a character. She is just a generic obstacle that literally anybody else could take.
Exactly. And that's the biggest problem with the Revenants. I don't think they handled them properly at all. And even then, the Revenants themselves create further inconsistencies because now we have Revenants apparently being the same as Scorpion and Noob Saibot, when there was actually a fine line between the two in the previous timeline.
I think that's partly down to the fact that all these undead are being sourced back to Quan Chi now, whereas the only one that was possibly tied to him originally was Noob because Brotherhood of Shadow, whereas Scorpion had no real ties to Quan Chi. Sindel kind of did through some MK Mythologies revelations with the manual and such, but that was it.
Yeah, but I still do think that even Scorpion was tied to Quan Chi through the fact that he was actually revived in the Netherrealm with this whole vengeance thing, and it's Quan Chi basically masterminding this whole thing once again, right? So I still do see the ties, but yeah, I do get where you're coming from.
I'm actually considering making a video about how Quan Chi was kind of an incompetent fool in the original timeline. Haha, yes, Scorpion, man fueled by vengeance, particularly in this case the murder of his family and clan. 'Twas I who murdered your family and clan. Haha, back to hell with you.
The Mortal Kombat 4 ending always gets me. Well, okay, those leaks that we mentioned earlier. Where do you think NetherRealm are going with those? What do you think is accurate? What do you hope to see?
I would say it's fairly likely that Shiva probably will make it in, because they have the model for her, so there's no reason not to include her. Plus, she is a fan favourite. People want to see her back. It'd be weird if we don't get the cyborgs as well, in some form, whether it's Triborg or Sector and Cyrax as separate. Because they have the movesets, they have the base movesets there, and they're among the only characters in the game who don't have red blood. It'd be weird if they kept in the black blood for them, but then didn't actually do anything with that.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at that, because I agree with you that it would be a waste to not use the models, but at the same time, NetherRealm have kind of given us evidence of this being the case with MKX, where they ignored Rain, Serena, although Rain was more actually playable, but you get, like Shiva. Serena was like Shiva. Why was Serena not brought in, for example, when, for the record, she's one of my favorite characters, but why was she not brought in when all the fans were pretty much asking for her at the time? It's the same thing with Shiva, although Shiva has been on those leaks anyway.
It's one of the things that makes it unpredictable about NetherRealm, because you look at something and say, well, this is logical for them to do this. I mean, why would they put so much effort into this thing if they weren't going to use it? But that's just how NetherRealm operates.
The realm is, yeah.
I think there is probably a higher chance of them making it in than what you could normally expect, because this game is supposedly going to be supported for longer, whereas NetherRealm's normal approach is support it for a year and move on.
Yes, that is the case. But what I'm worried about is that they're just going to say that and then move on.
So, I'm sure that all those other characters probably would have made the DLC of MKX had it gone on for another year or two, but they're moving on to Injustice 2, so they can't really do that. Which is just bizarre, because I don't think any other fighting series does that. The rest of them will support the game for multiple seasons of DLC.
Exactly, and I mean, it's more money, so why not go with it? I've never understood that approach at all.
I think part of the reason why MK is so different from a lot of the fighting games is kind of the Western mindset, because most of the fighters are Japanese. I mean, it's not. You can't really say this is definitely what it is, because Killer Instinct was Western developed, and that works more like a Japanese one. But I think Warner Bros. Probably has something to do with it.
Yeah, it's the whole mindset behind it, the different approach basically that they're taking. But I do hope that they actually follow through on their promise to support this game longer than their other titles, because with all my problems of MK11, I would still like to see it supported. I would like to see Mortal Kombat continue. I'm a Mortal Kombat fan, right? So more Mortal Kombat is always good for me.
I'd also like the character selection screen to add someone down next to Cetrion, so she's not just on her own, just for no reason.
Apparently we're supposed to have, 62 characters in total by the end of this, apparently, if we get a third combat pack. And I can see that happening. My biggest issue with that would most likely just be the fact that we're probably going to get a ton of guests.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a fan of.
And MK is a weird one because of the nature of how violent it is. It's simultaneously good and bad as far as the guest characters go, because it's bad because it means that a lot of characters that you might want to see aren't going to make it in. Like, you're not going to get Batman in there. You're not going to get all these other characters, even ones like, say, Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden. A very violent game, but are the owners of that character going to want to see him get torn apart? But at the same time, because of how violent they are, some characters can be represented far better in MK than elsewhere. Like Spawn and Kratos have both been in Soul Calibur as well, and their representations in MK I feel are far better than they were in Soul Calibur, because those games aren't as violent, but here they can really embrace that violent aspect of the characters.
I'm not a big fan of the guest characters at all. However, I was very impressed with Kratos, for example, and definitely Spawn, for sure.
It does feel like a lot of the time NetherRealm has a lot more passion and love for the guests than they do for their own characters.
Yes, that's something that I've been saying, and I actually think that it's due to, I mean, this is just my own claim, of course, but I think that the writers for MK11 were not actually MK fans. I think that the writers were just people that they brought on, and they basically, their content was some of the previous games, look at the movie, like pander to the movie nostalgics, and like go with that flow. So the whole crypt, it's the movie, right? Like you've even got the dining hall, everything.
With Kano.
Kano,
at the dining table.
Exactly. I mean, everything points towards that, and it's a shame because they definitely do give more love to those guest characters, and you'd want to see them giving love to the MK characters. That's why we're here. We're MK fans.
I'd say there's definitely some truth to the idea that the writers aren't MK fans, because, I mean, we have Sean Kittleson, who came in from the MKX comic, and if you go back to that first issue, the way Scorpion's backstory is portrayed is totally different from the games because it's based on legacy.
Yes, the names were different for his wife and son, weren't they?
Yeah, and Scorpion lives to see his wife and son dead before he is killed himself, which wasn't the case in the games. He died first. In fact, it's partly because he died that they were then killed.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things I have an issue with Scorpion's Revenge, that at least going off the trailers, that seems to be the way it's portrayed here. And I get it, it's more dramatic, but that's not accurate to the games. And then, so it seems that Kittleson watched Legacy as research rather than, reading up on the games. And I don't blame him entirely for it, because there should have been someone at NetherRealm looking over his scripts and making corrections.
Yes, especially if it was supposed to tie in with MKX, the actual game.
At the very least, someone should have said, we've changed the names of Scorpion's wife and son. I mean, that'd be the simplest thing to change. Even if the whole comic had been drawn and coloured and inked and everything, they could have changed that at least.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not Kanon Jubei, it's Harumi and Satoshi. And that's the thing that happens with Injustice as well, that there's so many contradictions between the comic and the games.
It's like, why make the content if you're not going to follow it?
Yeah, Scarecrow dies right at the start of the comic, and then he's just in Injustice 2 with no explanation.
Inconsistencies. It's a shame. It really is, because they take away from what could be great. Yeah.
For where they have been and why they weren't around. Oh, here we are. We've got those in now because of the comic. But what about Scarecrow?
Why not explain that?
Like, why make tie-in material if it's basically not canon?
Exactly, and why would you expect fans to follow it and pick it up if you're not actually going to follow through with it? Why would fans pick them up? Why would fans read them? There's no point to them.
The Injustice comic exists to explain what happened in that 5-year gap, but with these contradictions...
It doesn't.
It doesn't really... I mean, events similar to it probably played out, but... I'm not here to read an alternate version of events that is similar to what happened. I'm here to read the actual events.
Exactly. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the added content. I really do. I always want to read more or see more or play more. But it's not that difficult to stay consistent with your own writing. You could plan things out in advance. But getting back to the leak, sorry. Have you seen the latest leak?
Don't think I have.
Okay, there's a mention of an... Well, you know how it's always three letters, right? Which sort of says which character it's going to be. So,
the Rob one.
Rob, yeah. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah.
Who do you think it is?
And keep in mind, this leak came from a data dumper. So that's for especially for those listening. It's not necessarily that this information has been released. It's just that people have kind of been going through source code, and these are some of the stuff that they found. One of them being the 3 letters ROB.
And there is some credit to stuff like that, like the original leak from the Switch files.
Yeah, the entire game was leaked.
Oh, yeah, that the full, all the combat pack characters, completely accurate. Most of the intros were still in the game. Some got tweaked, like a couple of Sindels were altered, but by and large, it was all there. It was completely accurate. So there is some validity to it.
When it comes to NetherRealm games, if I see a proper data mine leak, I believe it. So who do you think ROB is?
I think the two that everyone suspects is either Rob for the Cyborgs or RoboCop. And RoboCop would make sense, but you do run into the issue that he's kind of a slow, tough robot man, and it's the same reason that I don't think Michael Myers would be all that great a fit, because he's basically just Jason again. But at least there it's a different character in a different game, whereas here, RoboCop and Terminator, while it would be fun to see them fight in Mortal Kombat, they would probably play a bit too similarly if you're going to put them both in the same game.
Yeah, and even going on from that further, like you've mentioned Michael Myers being similar to Jason. A lot of Terminator's actual moves are pretty much Jason's, just slightly altered. So technically, if we had all of them...
We had somebody in the Mortal Kombat group try to tell us that ROB stood for Rambo. So there's a little extra...
How?
Because it's spelled the same, right?
Think about these leaks. People just see a couple letters and they just run with it, and they'll make it into whatever they want. And then you'll see a post on Reddit, and then
yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of interested in seeing if Rambo works out.
Guys, Rob clearly stands for Robert De Niro.
I'm really hoping it's not Robin. I'm really hoping it's not Robin.
I loved Robin in Injustice.
Yeah, me too. I love Robin, but I don't want him in Mortal Kombat. Thank you.
The ROB for Cyrix and Sector makes the most sense for me, just because those two characters, the model's already there. We've already had modders go in and play with those two characters.
We had that in MKX with Rain. You could play Rain in MKX if you modded it.
Yeah, very true.
But the other problem is that they've said no repeat DLC.
Well, in essence, Ed just said Rain was less likely for MKX because he'd been DLC in the past. He didn't say absolutely not, just less likely. And the fact that we're another game removed from that. I mean, remember, these two games released almost a decade apart, so they know the demand. There's an upcoming Combat League season themed around Rain, where the characters are getting purple colour schemes. So I wouldn't rule him out entirely, but though I have heard that there was another member of the dev team during MKX's initial run who said that, but no one's been able to source it, so I don't know how valid that is.
I wanted to say that NetherRealm have never specifically stated there is no actual no repeat DLC. Now, that is something that has been going around on all forums, YouTube, Reddit, Facebook, and then everybody always says, well, they've said it, and they actually haven't. There was one person who hinted at it, one of the NetherRealm workers, employees, Danish Said, I think his name is. I'm pretty sure he is the guy who said they would not be doing more repeat DLC. He is also the guy who specifically said that the team are all Rain fans. So I'm curious to see how far they take this apparent no repeat DLC rule when they're not even actually following their own rules, such as no NPCs, which was specifically stated.
All of us at NetherRealm are really big fans of Rain, which is why we've made an arbitrary rule to stop ourselves from putting him in the game.
So
it's a shame, but yeah. Sorry.
Besides Rob, what were the other characters that were leaked?
Fujin.
Yeah, Fujin was part of the original Switch leak as well. Like some of his intros that revealed that he's a big fan of Johnny Cage movies.
But FUJ might actually stand for Rambo.
True, that is true.
Now, if Fujin does make it into Mortal Kombat 11, to me that would be really redeeming, kind of bringing back a lot of those 3D era fans, because he was pretty great in the old games, in my opinion.
I loved Fujin. I thought he was amazing. I was hoping that they would get rid of Raiden at some point to bring in Fujin to replace him.
Yeah, that was the idea, clearly after MK4, but then they didn't. And then I remember reading somewhere, I don't remember where, but supposedly that was why Raiden dies in Deception's intro, because they were going to bring Fujin in, but then for whatever reason they backed out and put in Dark Raiden instead. But it's clear that, I mean, the whole successor next generation thing has been in the plans close since MK4 when we got Kai and Fujin in the roster, but then they did nothing with it.
As always seems to be the case.
That's another future wasted potential.
I'm getting lots of hints for your channel in this episode. It's great.
You want a hint for the channel? In this year in May, I will be doing Mortal May 2 because Mortal May 1 went over well, and actually, really since I did number 1, I was thinking I'm just going to do number 2 as well. Why not?
All right. So a lot to look forward to then.
Yeah, really.
In fact, that the Fujin and Kai wasted potential is on the list, so you're going to get that in May.
All right. I always like to hear more about Fujin. I'm not a big fan of Kai, admittedly, but I do like Fujin a lot. And it's nice to see that he's probably going to be making it back. Although, I am really hoping for Havoc.
FUJ clearly sounds for Future John, as in John Connor from Terminator 2.
That seems likely, but I still think Rambo makes more.
Now, STY or STR. That is the third character release or leak, isn't it?
A lot of people talk about Striker, so I guess it probably was STR.
Oh God, I really hope it's not Striker. We have way too many soldiers. I'm so sick of it. Bring back the Oriental martial arts. What has happened, MK? Why do we have so many guns?
That was one of the things I was interesting about MKX was because it's doing the next generation thing like Tekken and Soul Calibur or Street Fighter even, but it did it in a completely different way where the successor characters don't just completely replace the originals. The originals get to stick around and actually interact with them in the story. But we don't get much of it. We get like 2 scenes with Kenshi and his son. Jax and Jackie interact only once over the radio, so they didn't even do it particularly well. And then the next game comes along, and it's clear that this was a mistake because the roster is completely full up of characters who are too similar, and a lot of other characters don't get to come back.
That's my biggest issue with the roster in MK11. The roster would technically, I think the roster is sort of an improvement from MKX outside of the DLC. Now, the biggest problem is that they've brought back all of these characters. If you're going to create Jackie, if you're going to create Cassie, why are their parents still in the game? Either have them replace them or get rid of 1 or 2 of them in some way. There's no point in having all these characters who are very similar.
Part of the issue is, I think there's kind of a conflict of interest where they want to do some new things, but at the same time they feel constrained by nostalgia. Because we haven't had an MK game without the full MK1 playable roster since DCU, which only lacked Johnny Cage. we keep having all the same characters over and over again. Jax and Kitana, they keep making it back in. We have all these characters from MK1 and 2 constantly.
It's a shame as well, because it really stops them from being able to bring in all the other loved characters from different games who haven't had such a chance. I think the only characters who should be, in the game, regardless of whatever other choices they make, should be Sub-Zero and Scorpion. They are the poster boys. It makes sense. Even Raiden should be able to be dropped. Even Liu Kang, in my opinion. I just feel like they're holding themselves back.
It's an interesting question to ask with pretty much any fighting series. Are there any characters that absolutely have to be in every game? Because it does limit you quite a bit. I mean, you look at something like Street Fighter 3, it was probably a mistake to cut everybody except for like 2 guys, but it had so many new characters, and a lot of those characters are well liked. So you never know how many cool new characters we theoretically could have gotten in MK had we just stopped having so many returning characters.
Exactly.
And don't get me wrong, I love having a lot of returning characters. It's good to see a lot of old faces, especially if it's a character who hasn't been around for a while, or a character who maybe people don't like too much, like Mavado or Su Hao, who could be given a second chance to do something different. Like Stryker was eventually able to get over with the fans, and that took him over a decade, but it happened eventually. But in the modern era, that probably wouldn't even happen, because they'd be too worried to give Stryker another chance, because we have to have Jax and Sonya instead.
And it's such a shame, because Jax and Sonya have pretty much taken Stryker's role completely. There is literally no point, in my opinion, for Stryker anymore. NetherRealm won't really give a chance to certain characters who do deserve that chance. Like, as you said, Su Hao could get completely revamped. Mavado could really do well as bringing back the Red Dragon and everything. Stryker, I don't see a point to him anymore, purely because of the fact that Sonya has, really taken his character, you know? So...
which is kind of funny, because originally Curtis Stryker was going to be an MK1 before being turned into Sonya Blade. So
come full circle.
But I think it says a lot to how the series has gone, that if you really think about it, the only character who really plays like Stryker is Erron Black, because they're the only ones who actually have guns in gameplay. Like, Sonya has them in intros and in cutscenes, but in gameplay she doesn't, and yet they still feel like this amorphous grey mass of the soldier character. Even though they do play fairly distinctly, it doesn't feel like they do.
We agree on the fact that NetherRealm's sort of approach has most definitely changed in how they're taking, like, the direction of Mortal Kombat. And one huge thing that I've seen with that is that they seem to be focusing a lot less on the lore and more on the actual fighting game community. So they're going competitive. What do you think of that?
Well, that's the thing, because I made a joke about this on Twitter back when it didn't make the Evo lineup, I think.
Yes.
Which I found hilarious. So I made a comment about how you try and appease the FGC guys and see how that works out for you. Have it. But then there were a few people who were giving me stick for it, saying that they're actually going more casual, which I can kind of also see.
Yeah,
so I don't
it's
really know.
A sort of weird double approach. It's like they're trying to be more competitive, but also appeal to the casual audience rather than MK fans.
I mean, there's definitely some validity to the casualization of it. I mean, the fact that you just get a super.
Yes.
When you get to a certain amount of health, and the fact that there's no penalty for missing it, you just keep trying, and like the fact that the gauges just keep building constantly, that feels very much like it's made for people who don't normally play fighting games. Because even though I'm not really into the competitive scene, I can definitely see why the old approach, in theory, is a lot better, where there's risk versus reward. You have to earn these opportunities, and there's always, do I use some of my bar for enhancing a super, or do I save it for it if I'm in a tight spot and need to be defensive, or do I just save it all up and do a super to do a bunch of damage? But now all of that thinking is gone. It's just the gauge will be back up. I'll have a pip in a couple of seconds. I'll just use that move then, and then I'll still have a pip for my defense, because they do separate things now, and then I'll get a super when I get down to a certain amount of health. So there's definitely some truth to the casualization of the whole thing. But they definitely are focusing a lot more on the gameplay than the story.
As you said, like, they are taking it to a very, well, they're making it a lot more casual friendly in terms of the gameplay. That is true. I feel like they're trying to hit this sort of balance between the two of appealing to the fighting game community, but also being able to bring in the casual fans. And firstly, it's not helped them in terms of the tournaments, the tournament scene, obviously, with their exclusion from EVO, which I do also find hilarious, because I think that they have left the actual Mortal Kombat fans in the dust. And it's a shame. And you can see that from just purely from the fact that they've removed the character bio screens. We don't even have that anymore.
Yeah. The last time we didn't have one was Armageddon. That was because there was like
so many of them.
Characters.
Totally understandable. But now, I mean, we had an amazing one in MKX.
It's not difficult to implement. That's the weird thing. I mean, didn't Injustice 2 have it where you had the bio, like it's a button you press while customizing the character or something? At least with Armageddon, you can say, well, they didn't exist. Whereas with MK11, the bios do exist. They have written them. They're just on the website.
They're on the website, exactly.
It's some Destiny tier storytelling here.
It's a very weird approach, and it's a shame, in my opinion, because I am obviously an MK fan because of the lore. Or at least that's a huge part of it for me. So, I mean, I wish that they had taken the approach they'd gone with in MK9, where you could look at the characters in the crypt. That would have been perfect, especially with the whole battle damage toggle. That was pretty cool.
That's another weird thing where despite how violent the fatalities get, a lot of the battle damage stuff have been almost entirely gone now. It's just, I've got a bit of blood splashed on me now, maybe a couple of bruises. Whereas look at some of the older games, like, it was a bit extreme for like massive chunks of flesh. But
MK's always been over the top.
Yeah.
It's what we expect. It's the same thing with the designs, in my opinion.
I mean, this kind of ties into why. I was listening to the first episode of this show, and you're talking about the animated movie using the MKX designs, and I think that's kind of this weird state, because the 2011 designs for a lot of the women were questionable, very true to MK, but a lot of them were a bit much, like with Sonya, for example. Then you go to MK11, and they've kind of gone a bit too far in the opposite direction, where Katana is wearing a skin-tight outfit, but there's like no outline for her ass.
Yes.
And why is she in a skin-tight bodysuit? How does this fit Katana? But it's weird because they had a good middle ground in MKX.
Yeah, I think that MKX was a very good middle ground, actually.
MKX has a lot of problems. Like, there's no denying that. Like the color palette was really drab, and some of the designs weren't great, and there are a lot of characters you'd want to see that weren't there, or all these other issues. But in terms of the actual character designs and stuff, and probably even in terms of the gameplay and the general approach and attitude towards the game, I think X was done better than its predecessor or successor. I
myself preferred MK9 as a whole, other than, I suppose the gameplay. Now, I definitely agree that the actual outfits and designs in MKX made more sense than MK9's. However, one of the things that I mentioned is that Mortal Kombat for me has always been over the top. So MK9 made a lot of sense to me. It's like, in Deception, Melina's alternate outfit and stuff, things like that. They all made sense to me, and just because it's MK, I don't expect people in real life to be able to fight as they would normally in high heels, but it's MK. MKX had a good balance. MK11 took it way too far.
Because part of the thing is that obviously the main inspirations for MK was stuff like Big Trouble in Little China, superhero comics from the 90s. And so you can see where that influence impacts a lot of the designs with some of the characters, and just generally the way a lot of the characters look. I mean, everyone has basically the same build.
Yes, exactly.
Pretty much all the guys are, there's the odd outlier like Bo Raicho, but most of the guys are these big muscle men. The women are like Amazons, basically. Obviously, you want to see a bit more variety than that. You want to see some characters who are a bit more. Like Sony should be more conservative and serious. You shouldn't be able to see her thong, for example.
I feel like it was a staple of the games for a while, to be honest. But I definitely agree with you.
It's one of those things though, where, whether you like it or not, that is a part of MK's identity. It's always been a part of what the series is and what makes it different from a lot of other fighting games. And if you take that away, it becomes less interesting. You see that a lot with the story, actually. The fact that there's so much focus on the special forces. It's just all these soldier mans. I want to see all the monks. Yeah,
They're taking one thing way too far, and it's a shame. Because we're losing the variety that MK always had. Why? And as you said, why don't we get more people like Bo Rai Cho? Bring back Bo Rai Cho. We need that sexy body back in this series. Every time I think of Bo Rai Cho and MKX, I just remember the big belly flop. It's great.
I have a theory as to partly why the characters are so similarly built is because of the damage models. Because especially with how it is now, like you cut the character open and like Bo Rai Cho's would have to be different. Because I noticed this with I forget which finisher it was, but it's one that reduces the characters down to like where there's no skin. And I was looking at Devora in MK11 and I thought, okay, out of curiosity, what are her feet like? She has those new bug feet in MK11, and I thought, well, when she's stripped down to just her muscles, is it still going to look like that, or will it be normal human ones? It's normal human ones.
I see, yeah.
Jack's robot arms, they're fully robotic in this timeline. Still got flesh inside.
Flesh, exactly.
Frost is a cyborg. All that's left is her head. Nope, human inside. Even though we see her cybernetic spine in one of her intros, if you rip her head off, it's a human spine.
It's a human spine, exactly. Yeah, the battle damage makes a lot of sense. That's probably the reason why they went with that.
I think that the fact that how much detail they put into this stuff now is detrimental, not just because of all the claims of how it gave a lot of the developers PTSD to do research for the looks of it, but also because it does limit a lot of these things. Like you can't have as much variety. I mean, I think a lot of people want Liu Kang to be a lot leaner, more like Bruce Lee, a bit more wiry, rather than this big muscle man. But you can't really do that because that would require different damage models. And then Bo Rai Cho can't really be here because of stuff like that. And I'm sure if the cyborgs make it in our RoboCop, they're going to be human inside as well, unless you just reuse what they've done for Terminator.
Probably would be the case, to be honest, with NetherRealm and MK11. Although, speaking of like the battle damage and everything, what is your favorite finisher in as a whole in all of Mortal Kombat?
Ooh, I think Scorpion's one with his spear in MK11. He's definitely up there. The one where he splits them in two.
Goes through the portal, goes under them and everything.
Yeah, it makes good use of his powers, which is something I think a lot of fatalities fail at. And some of them are a bit too goofy, like when he blasts through you on fire and now you just a spine.
Yeah.
In that one section, or I'm going to burn a hole right through the middle of their spine, but they'll still be able to stand up even though there's a chunk of the spine missing.
In typical Mortal Kombat fashion.
And the heart drops down like a Looney Tunes cartoon. it can be a bit goofy.
No, I feel you. I get you. Although that is a very nice fatality. I did love that one when I saw it. So great choice.
I was always quite fond of the one he had in 2011, even though that was another over-the-top silly one where he slices them at the torso and the neck and then kicks the torso out and slices the head in half.
It was cool, but I didn't feel like it was specifically Scorpion, you know what I mean? Not like to the same extent as the kunai, as you just mentioned.
It's one of those things where some characters, they just do weird things that don't really fit the character in terms of their abilities. Also, the fact that a lot of the fatalities are just completely overblown when the characters aren't violent psychopaths, like Johnny and Sonya, who should be a bit more efficient in killing people.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. All right, well, so where can our listeners find you?
A lot of places. There's YouTube, the Fourth Snake. There's on Twitter @4thSnake, because someone else took @the Fourth Snake before I got onto Twitter, and they don't use it. They don't use the account. This is one of those egg icon ones with no tweets.
I had the same issue with Mortal Kombat memes, so I feel you.
Also on DeviantArt as the Fourth Snake, which is where I post a lot of pictures and stories. I always put the scripts for my videos on there as well.
Your Mortal Kombat Chronicles series as well as on there, right?
Yeah. For people who aren't familiar, MK Chronicles is basically me taking my ideas for how MK could be improved with its story. Like, say on the Wasted Potential one, where I did the Kung Lao stuff, saying how you can amalgamate different versions of Kung Lao into one character that's really interesting. That existed as a story before I did that, so that's the kind of stuff I'm doing there. I'm approaching number 50 at this point. I'm on about 43 or so chapters I've done. and they're set all across the MK timeline. So, and there's plenty for different characters. Like Melina's got a bunch of chapters because she's just so fun to write. So there's stuff like that.
I highly recommend checking it out because it's a lot of fun to read. I haven't read all of it myself; it's been a while, but it's really interesting to see your approach to the different characters and all the different ways the story could have evolved. So I highly recommend that any listeners check that out.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you can find myself on Mortal Kombat Meme Realm on Facebook. As well as find Phantom and I on the Mortal Kombat group. Thank you very much, For Snake. It's been great having you on. It's gone on a lot longer than we expected. And that's, I think, because we were just enjoying this one so much.
Yeah, if you guys have me, I'd be glad to come back.
We'd love to have you back another time, and we can.
I think there's a lot about MK we could talk about.
Oh, definitely. I'm sure we'll find some topics that we can suggest to you, and we can have you back on another time for sure. And it'll be sometime soon, I'm sure as well. But we'll be doing this bi-weekly. As always, see if you can figure out who's going to be the next guest on the show, and we'll be discussing topics such as Mortal Kombat 11's actual gameplay, as well as the new Mortal Kombat animated movie, Mortal Kombat Legends: Scorpion's Revenge. So, thank you all for joining and listening with us.